Hi friends, my name is Dasha and today I'm going to be talking about the 20 books I want to read before the end of 2020. The year is half over and I have done pretty well so far. I've read about 42 books and my goal was only 50, so I'm getting, we're getting there. But as usual, I have a TBR that is much larger than I can possibly hope to get through in a reasonable amount of time. And I have a lot of physical books that I have not read yet. So a lot of these books I actually own and I really kind of want to start working through them before I keep accumulating books, because it is going to happen. I like buying books. So without further ado, let's talk about the books I really want to read before the end of the year. First book I have here is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This is a classic revenge story. Everyone's heard about it. I don't know minute details because I watched the movie back in high school, so I don't remember too much about it. It is a massive book, but I'm hoping that I can find some time to kind of just chip away at it a little by little and really get through it, because I'm really excited for this one. I have a feeling it will be one that I will love. And from what I remember, I did enjoy the story. It's just been so long that I really want to just get back into it and be done with this goddamn thing. The next book on my list is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. This is a horror book about a family that moves into a house and they discover that it is bigger on the inside than it looks like on the outside. And based on that synopsis, I'm sold. I'm really starting to get into horror a lot more, and I really want to read some of the ones that are considered like best of the genre. There might be a few other ones on this list that do fall into that category, and I'm probably going to end up ordering this one pretty soon because I just really love the sound of it. From what I heard, the format of the book is very interesting as well, so I don't want to like spoil myself for it, but I'm just so curious to see what this is. The next book on my list is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Young adult fantasy that is apparently very purple prose, very fantastical, about a lost city and a boy that goes off to find it. It is pretty big and I have a lot of big books on my TBR. I seem to hate myself. But it's just one that I've wanted to read for a while. It just sounds so interesting. I've heard so many like good things about how beautiful it is and how interesting. So I really do want to get into it. It's just, and like I have it and I prefer reading fantasy in physical form anyway, so why have I not gotten into it? Who knows? Following with that horror thing I said earlier, the next book on my list is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I believe there are a few other stories in here, little short stories, but I'm mainly interested in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I know this is a classic of the horror genre. I know it's been adapted tons of times and is referenced all over popular culture, but I have no idea what the actual story is. So I'm really excited to see what it's about. Next book on my list is Pet Sematary by Stephen King, the story of a family who moves into a town where they have a cemetery that seems to bring things that were buried back to life. This is considered a super horrifying book and I am here for it. I have read a little bit of Stephen King and I do enjoy his writing style. I think the only one that was really considered horror that I read from him was Misery, and that was more psychological, so I'm excited to see how maybe like typical horror works when it comes to Stephen King. And I've just heard like so many good things about it, not about the movies but about the books, so I'm pretty excited to kind of dive into Pet Sematary for the first time because I've never even watched the movies. The next book on my list is The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. I have the bind up of The Killing Moon and the Shadowed Sun here because that was the format I found it in at Valley Village for $5, so I'm not going to pass it up and be forced to buy two books for like $25. $5. This is an Egyptian-inspired adult fantasy having to do with like blood magic. And you know what? Let me just read you what's on the back here that got me to buy this, because I didn't even hear about this when I found it in Valley Village. I've never heard anyone talk about it, but this had me sold. Assassin priests, mad kings, the goddess of death. Who can end the destruction? Yes. So I've read The 100,000 Kingdoms and the 5th season by her, and I'm looking forward to continuing with the series, so I'm hoping to maybe read this one and The City We Became, possibly, and kind of just round off starting all the N.K. Jemisin things. I'm so in love with her writing style. I think she's a phenomenal author, and I'm very excited to just keep reading her stuff and keep supporting her. The next book on my list is The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu. This is an adult sci-fi trilogy having to do with first contact with aliens. I've not heard a lot of people talk about it, but the people that do, namely Books with Emily Fox, she was raving about it, and I've just heard like good things from people who have read it. I found it on my Apple Books for like $2.99 or $3.99, so I was like, I'll try it out, because it's always on hold at the library, so I'm like, I'll try it out. And if I like it, I'll go ahead and get the whole trilogy, because I prefer, like fantasy, to read sci-fi and physical. It's just a little bit easier to follow along. But I'm excited to see what it is, because I've just heard, like I said, such good things. And I don't have a lot of sci-fi on this list. I think that might be the only one, so I should add some on there. And that is my pick for 2020. The next book I have is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This one was released, was it earlier this year? Was it last year? I can't remember, but I found this at Value Village too for like $5, and I was floored because it was a more recent release and it is in fantastic condition, and I found the hardcover and I was like all proud of myself. All I know is that it follows a boy who finds his name in a book in a library, and it kind of follows his life, and he's kind of surprised as to why his name is in a book in a random library, and it kind of sets off this whole adventure. I have read Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and I did quite enjoy it. I thought that her writing lent itself really well to nice atmospheres and like vibes, so I'm excited to see how she brings it to this. I've heard fantastic reviews, and I heard that the writing is still phenomenal, still beautiful, and really looking forward to diving in something like this, standalone fantasy with a fantastic whimsical world. I'm sold, dude. The next book on my list is Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is another book that I got on my Apple Books for dirt cheap. It's the first book in the Witcher series. I have tried reading The Last Wish, which is like the little bind-up of short stories, but I don't think it just worked for me. I'm looking forward to actually reading a novel set in this world. The only thing I know about it is that Geralt is the Witcher, which means he has some sort of divine powers that other people don't have. One of the reasons I really want to read it is because I really want to watch the Netflix show, but I love reading the book first. It's just so much more like satisfying to finally see it on the screen, and I also kind of want to play the video game, but I just really feel like I want to, get into the book first, so who knows if that'll happen, but I hope it does. The next book on my list is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is a World War II historical fiction following two girls in Nazi-occupied France. One of them is a rebel trying to defeat the Nazis, and the other one is hosting a Nazi officer in her house. So it follows both of them and kind of how they have to deal with this very difficult time. I am, in addition to being a classics scholar, I study World War II quite a bit. I find it fascinating because there's just so much there, because it was more recent. We have a lot of accounts of it, and it's just it's so interesting. So I've actually never read any historical fiction before. As a nitpicky historian, I'm curious to see how well authors do with such a setting, see if they get the vibe right, see if I enjoy reading about people in this time, even if they're fictional, or if I really do just prefer non-fictions. So, we'll see, but I've heard really good things about it. I've heard that it's super touching and emotional, so I do kind of want to, read it for that aspect as well. The next book on my list is Vicious by V.E. Schwab, the story of two college roommates who basically have near-death experiences to become superhuman, and you follow, at the beginning of the book, one guy who's one of them that's just getting out of prison, and you're trying to figure out what's happening, and it sounds super dark, super morbid. I'm absolutely here for it. I have heard fantastic things. I'm not a huge fan of V.E. Schwab's writing in terms of... That's a bold statement because I have another one of her books on this list. But I tried A Darker Shade of Magic and it just wasn't really for me. I didn't really like the characters, but the concept was just so fascinating, and I'm hoping that in this case the concept is executed properly. And I might as well bring up the next book on the list, which is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Hasn't come out yet, but I do absolutely want to read it this year. I have it on pre-order. I'm so excited. Love story between a girl and the devil, and no one else remembers her even though she's immortal except for him. It sounds so angsty. It sounds so dark. I'm hoping she executes it flawlessly because I am so excited. No pressure or anything. The next book on my list is Permanent Record by Edward Snowden. If you don't know, he is the man that kind of uncovered the US government's involvement in surveilling their own citizens under the guise of anti-terrorism, and he exposed them and has been fighting for freedom ever since. I heard him talk to Joe Rogan on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I thought he was really well spoken, and I think his story is very interesting, so I'm really excited to actually read the book. It came out last year, I think, at the end of last year, and I still have not read it, and it's driving me up the wall because I'm really interested. I don't know why I haven't just like gone and done it. So putting it on this list, writing it into existence, speaking it into existence, I can do this. The next book is also a nonfiction. It's A Brief History of Vice by Robert Evans. This is essentially about how, you know what, let me read you the thing that got me so interested in this. Let me just read it to you because I think it's like exemplifies what this book will probably be. Guns, germs, and steel might have transformed us from hunter-gatherers into modern man, but booze, sex, trash talk, and tripping built our civilization. If you're telling me that history and science can convince me that being a bad person is okay, that doing bad things is okay, I'm sold. It just sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like something that would kind of take things that you know from history and present it in a new light, which I'm always a fan of. I like getting my views challenged, so I'm super interested, and it sounds like it could probably be a very fun and like easy read, which sometimes you need, you know, not all nonfiction has to be dense textbook material. Sometimes it can be fun and educational, and that's what we're about here on this channel. Next book on my list is a bit embarrassing. Like I said in another video, I'm just exposing myself on this channel at this point. I would like to read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I have never read it. I never had a ton of desire when I was younger to read it. But at this point, given how popular it is in culture, I probably should. And I'm just trying to read through a bunch of classics in general in my life. I really want to understand why they're classics, so I was gonna get to it anyways. But I'm like, if I force myself to read one classic other than The Count of Monte Cristo, I guess, it should be Pride and Prejudice. It's just sad at this point that I haven't, honestly. Next book on my list is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I believe this is a sci-fi slash thriller following a man who gets accosted when he's walking home one day, and when he wakes up, his wife, his kid are not his own, his life is not his own, nothing is the same. Sounds vague. I'm interested. I think it was Books and Law that put me onto this. She was just raving about it and how good it was, and I spotted it at Valley Village for cheap, and I was, you know. The next book on my list is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. This is a fairly short book about the last man on Earth dealing with being by himself, and there's a bunch of vampires around him. Everyone on Earth has essentially become a vampire. I heard it's terrifying. I heard it's depressing. I heard it is just like spectacular. It's nice and short. I've been meaning to read it all goddamn year, and I still have not gotten to it, so I'm putting it out there. I'm gonna read this book. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. We're almost at the end. The next book I want to talk about is Tales of Terror by H.P. Lovecraft, another classic from the horror genre. I am looking forward to, you know, reading more horror, as I said, and this is one of like the OGs, and I've heard that they're still terrifying, his stories. Granted, I don't think I'll read the whole thing. It's, you know, it's somewhat large, but even if I read a few short stories from this around Halloween time, I'll be pretty happy. I just really want to understand what it is about H.P. Lovecraft that really set off the horror genre, what really kind of helped define it, because that's what I've heard about his work. One of the last books on my list is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. In case you couldn't tell, I have started this. So what actually happened with this was I binged the entire series last summer, from season 1 to season 8, and I picked the book up about a month or so after I finished. And I was like, oh, let me see how it compares while it's fresh in my mind. And then I just found that I really wasn't interested in rehashing it right away. I wanted to kind of sit and stew in it a little bit. So I think now is a good time. I watched the series about a year ago, so now's a good time to maybe get back into it. I will say, I do want to buy myself the full-size paperbacks because I do want to annotate it. I cannot stand annotating small mass-market paperbacks. The pages in them are just so like thin and gross, and it's not even an aesthetic thing as much as it is like I just don't want my shit to like bleed through. I don't want to accidentally rip the page erasing something. Like, who knows, these mass market paperbacks are just not good quality, and they're not that much more expensive for the regular ones, so I'd rather just get one of those and just collect those for the series. So but I heard that also the books, they go on longer than the show did in terms of timeline, and they kind of veer off the timeline of the show, thank God, and B, they're just obviously better because you get more insight into the characters than you would on the show, and the show is already phenomenal. I actually really enjoyed it, so I do want to read this hopefully this year. And the final book on this list is We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. This is a young adult contemporary / sci-fi. As far as I know, it has to do with like these aliens that come down to Earth, and they find a boy and they basically ask him, look, this button will destroy the Earth. You have the choice whether you want to press it or not. And I guess he's going through some personal things, so he's actually contemplating it. So I'm interested in this premise because I'd love to know what I would do in that position. And I'm sure this book will bring up some, interesting topics about like humanity and, the value of life and all that fun stuff. And I love sitting and contemplating my own humanity. It humbles me, I don't know, I feel like this book could go either way for me. I feel like I could either really love it or really hate it. I'm hoping I really enjoy it. I've wanted to read it since I discovered BookTube last year. I do want to pick it up, hopefully get to it this year. And that wraps it up for this list of 20 books that I want to read before the end of 2020. If any of these you have read or they are your favorite, please yell at me below to read them. I would like to know maybe which ones to prioritize. Watch me not finish a single one of these because I am a massive mood reader and I might not feel like any of these books. But yeah, if any of these are like worth reading right away, let me know. Follow me on my social media, and otherwise I will see you guys next time. Bye!